2026 is shaping up to be an interesting year in English cricket. There are some changes coming to the 100, but today I want to talk about the proposed changes by the ECB on the T20 Blast. Joining me to talk about it is Nick Friend from The Cricketer. Nick, great to see you, and your first time on 98 Not Out. I can't believe it.
Thanks for having me. Talk about a subject that I suppose has accidentally become like a specialist area. I've banged the drum on this for ages, so um, I don't want to say exciting that it's got somewhere, but no, it has belatedly got somewhere, even if the changes will sound minor, I suppose.
So yeah, I mean, you're right. The Cricketer, led by yourself, have been campaigning for this for 2 years, probably a bit longer, but at least 2 years. So let's just summarise what the
Mm,
proposed changes to the tournament are.
yeah. Um, it sounds so pathetic when you say it. There are going to be too few games, and that, like, and also the more significant part of it is we're going back to the early days of the 2020 Cup, as it were, with three groups of six, so the North Group, the South Group, and the return of a sort of it's called so many things the Midwest Wales Central Division, which essentially takes the three, I suppose, least southern teams, the three least northern teams out of those two groups, and creates this third group of six, which will solve a lot of the issues that existed. I wouldn't go as far as saying that I campaigned for it, but I'd certainly say that I wrote many thousands of words about the the issues of the existing structure and how easily you could solve some of those with a competition that required fewer mental journeys, let's say, between Durham and Northampton and Hove and Cardiff on Friday nights and Saturday afternoons and such things. And the idea is that too few games has been long mooted in the Championship, but also but particularly in the Blast, I think, because the for a long time that the Blast was painted as a competition that couldn't afford to lose games because you needed 14 games, you needed seven home games, you needed the income. The counties couldn't exist without these. Um, I suppose this comes about through a mixture of scenarios, one of which is the influx of the Hunter money and therefore, at least the short term, the sort of lessening need um, for the money from those seven Blast games. Um, but also, I think equally personally is that the majority of counties have struggled to set out their seventh Blast game, or rather their seven Blast games. So speaking to a couple of chief executives earlier this summer, they just said, like, we'd love to argue against this and say, we need seven Blast games, but it's hard to argue against this when you're not selling those and when one or two of those games are pretty poorly attended on a Tuesday night in mid-May, at the end of May when it's cold, and because you've got no appointment to view and because you've suddenly got this game on Tuesday that no one knows about, people aren't coming to anyway. So I think the hope, and what I hope is that this new structure comes with the caveat, which is that the six games teams are going to get, the six home games that counties will get, are coming with a better structure in place around them to make it easier to sell those six games out than perhaps we've seen with 14 and 7 in the last few years.
Yeah, I think that's right because when I've been to Blast games, there is a complete discrepancy between, as you say, a game on a Tuesday night or a game Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, or even Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon
If
games.
you, if you if you speak to a lot of counties, they would say they prefer the Friday night because you can sell Friday night blast and that works, it's easy. And Sunday afternoon social kind of thing. And there, I hope what we'll see more and more in 26 and beyond is a competition that is broadly played on those 2 days, Fridays and Sundays. There are some counties who want Thursdays and Saturdays for home games, or certainly want Thursday evenings rather than Friday. Middlesex, for example, have
Yeah, in
long
London, yeah.
preferred Thursday to Friday, but equally Surrey have preferred Friday to Thursday. So um, it's not a one size fits all thing, um, but I think where we need to get to, and I hope where this is getting to, and the agreement that will be in place around a subtraction of the number of games is that if we're going to have fewer games, we want a better schedule. We want a reason for accepting fewer games. And that reason should be, and I think is, you will have a clearer, easier to understand, easier to sell schedule. And by easy to sell, I mean easier to sell to your casual fans almost, people who aren't checking every day to see when Kent are playing, when Leicestershire are playing, whoever it is. They know that their games are on a Friday and a Sunday, whether they're home or away. You can follow the tournament that way much more easily than you've been able to in the last few years. The the Blast in the last few years has been a ludicrously organised event. 50 days over a 50-day group stage, followed by a 46-day gap before the quarterfinals, followed by a finals day that comes without half the players that got you there in the first place because overseas players have long since gone home and moved on to the next competition, whatever. So um, it's been needed. It's been in need of a shake-up, and that's part of the reason I've said bang this drum. But also from a player welfare perspective, some of the journeys that players have been expected to do on a Friday night into a Saturday afternoon to then play at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon have been ludicrous. And if you want elite sport, you don't have players driving their own cars at 11:30 p.m. from one away ground to another to be playing a game 20 hours later. It's not clever. It will end in tears. Um, and I think the ECB have sort of felt bound to act after being nudged enough times. It didn't take 1 year of meetings with players and they've long known about this. The council have long known about this. I think it's just got to a point where the commercialization question w was also in question, if that makes sense. This has been brushed on the carpet for a very long time, but the combination of having the influx of money from the 100 sell-off, meaning that counties have a bit more leeway with their finances, hopefully, um, and the fact the blast itself, I think, is just visibly in need of of a bit of a change up. I'm really looking forward to. It sounds such a niche thing to say, but I'm really looking forward to the Central Group because I feel like we watch the same teams play each other over and over and over and over again. You must see that at Chelmsford, and of course you do play each other over again. That's the nature of a group stage. You play each other home and away. But the reality is, last year when Surrey played Durham in the quarter-final, that was the first time they'd ever played in the Blast. I think I'm right in saying that if Durham had reached the final last year, they'd have played Somerset for the first time in the Blast. Now, 25 years into competition, that shouldn't be happening. Um, and sure, some of that's down to teams being good at this, teams not being very good at this. Um, but a competition just goes stale, I think, if you have the same teams over and over
Yeah.
and over and over again. And I actually think one of the things that's quite nice about the One Day Cup that's going on in the background to the 100, not the background, going on alongside the 100 at the moment um, is that different teams are playing each other. Derby beats, no, they didn't. Derby lost to Surrey a few days ago, but how rarely did Derbyshire and Surrey play each other?
Mm.
They've not been in the same division of the county championship for a long time. I'd be amazed if they've ever played each other in the Blast. Um, the, these, there are only 18 teams. It's not football. We're not talking about an FA Cup game here between Tamworth and Spurs. Where where there is obvious, visible reason for why they don't meet very often. We're talking about 18 teams here, and if they're not playing each other, and if you're watching Essex play Kent over and over and over and over again, it does just get stale. It's the same players over again. We don't have the same transfer ecosystem as football has. You're watching broadly the same games. Um, so I'm really looking forward to a group stage where we're going to see, Worcestershire play Glamorgan. That game just doesn't fit in my head almost, if you know what I mean. We're not used to it because they've been separated for the best part of, well, for a decade and more. Obviously, we're used to it in Division Two of the County Championship over the last few years, not these last 2 years, but before then. But yeah, I'm weirdly excited just to to see some new games. I actually went to Northampton Durham this year to write about um essentially to write about like the final showdown, as it were. I mean, the what I should caveat that with is um they will still play each other occasionally in the Blast because to get to 12 games, as the eagle-eyed among the listeners will have been thinking, if to get to 12 games from three groups of six with teams playing each other home and away does require a bit of flexibility. So the idea is everyone will play each other home and away in their group of six, and then you'll play one team from each of the other two groups to get you up to 12, but also to gradually mean that over a period of time we will reach a point where everyone has played everyone. And I do genuinely think that part of the equation has come from everyone finding it a bit galling what's gone on the last couple of years with the quarterfinals. realizing that they were playing for the first time. Ravi Opara moved to Northants and was suddenly playing a bunch of teams for the first time ever.
Yeah.
When he moved start of last season, 24. Tamar Mills, I think, I'm fairly sure this is still the case. He's never played against Notts in the Blast. And that is so strange to me because Tamar Mills to me is like the Blast guy, right? He's one of the faces of
Yeah.
T20 only, been
And
playing the Blast,
OnlyFans.
of course. He's been playing Blast only for what, a decade more. We know him as the T20 guy, not a very successful T20 side, and somehow these paths have not crossed. So, um, it's not before time, and I think, as I say, I think it freshens up the competition in a way that has been needed, and I think that the timing is right because it means that hopefully the 14 game losing one home game each is not so keenly felt, both from the perspective of the money coming in from elsewhere, but also for the fact that no one at 14 of the 18 counties, I'd say, could honestly hand on heart say that the current situation is really working.
I think also for me, I mean, there's a few things that have been tweaked with, like you said, about the fixtures and that. But to me, the really important thing is it's been played in one block because it's been immensely frustrating for me when teams build momentum through the group stages. Then, as you say, there's a 46-day gap until quarterfinals day, and those teams that are still around at that stage are devoid of anything that got them there.
Yeah, and it's
And
not just the personnel, is it? It's the momentum. Like if you if you get to if you Northampton's a great example of this last year. I know they're in the quarters again, but last year they got to quarters for the first time in quite a while, and by the time the quarter final came round, Ravi Opara had enough time to go to the Cayman Islands, play in a T10 competition, break his thumb, be ruled out. And two other batters had broken their fingers against Gloucestershire the previous week in the championship game. So you turn up with almost like a skeleton shell side of what's got you there in the first place, having had a month and a half to not play T20 cricket. Those broken fingers for Northants came because there was a Champo round just beforehand. So you're not so you've lost momentum not just from your results but from the format as well. You've come back into it from the hundreds. Um, I might have got my I feel like I've got the no, I have got this right round because last year's quarters were in September. Yeah, so you've gone hundreds, 50 over cup for a lot of those players. In that North End side, for example. Then you've played a Champo game, and then you've got the Blast. So there's so much cricket between the T20 cricket, between the T20 and T20 Blast. Even if you've gone off and played the hundred, you've lost that sort of team element because you've played with a different bunch of blokes for a month. Um, yeah, but as I say, going back to the appointments of view thing, and also crucially, I think going back to trying to sell this competition to fans who aren't just your regular members, you need to you need to make it easy for people to want to come and to understand why they should come.
hmm,
And county cricket's three competitions at the moment. Take 2025 season, they're all corrupted in some way, right? The championship is played over 6 months, which it has to be. It's a long competition, but we use a different ball for 4 games of it. We have overseas players coming in and out and in and out, and no team will end the season with the team they started with. Fact. One Day Cup is arguably your least corrupted format because at least if nothing else, it is played in one block. But even then, you start off without a big wad of your players, and in some counties they'll be told, well, if you get the semis, you might have a few lads back along the way who come in from the hundred. So, and then you've got the Blast, which is um, the worst for that corruption because you have this squad that you start with. Rashid Khan never played at finals day, for example, for Sussex. He got Sussex finals every year, but he was never still there when finals day came
yeah,
around.
yeah.
So you've got this bizarre competition that, as you say, is played over such a long time that by the time you get to finals day, it's kind of just survival of the fittest. And Gloucestershire were a really good example last year of where that can benefit you in that they lost 7 games in the group stage. Um, if you lose 7 games in the 100 group stage, you're out. You've lost 7 out of 8 games. Um, if you lose 7 games in any group stage other than the IPL, you're out because the IPL is the only other competition where it's a 14-game group stage, and that, of course, is that long because there's a multi-billion-pound broadcast deal. There's never been any reason for game integrity reasons for the Blast to be 14 games through the group. Which it does also, as I said, as you say, it then means that it's not played in a block. So you have this long, endless group stage. Gloucester came out of that group stage. They qualified on net run rate ahead of Essex. They quarterfinals that came round. They played away at Warwickshire at Edgbaston on a pitch that suited them. They played it brilliantly. And then suddenly they'd done a dry run for finals day. Basically, they played at Edgbaston in the quarterfinal. They knew exactly how to play there. And they turned up a week later and went, wow, we've done this before. And they played the same game three times and played the best knockout cricket that the Blast has ever seen. They didn't concede more than 120 in three games. They won all three games fairly easily. Um, on finals day, they took 20 wickets and lost. Did they take 20 wickets and lose six? I think it was.
Mm.
They were impeccable, but they were also a very good advert for how the that structure of the big split between group and knockout can benefit you. Whereas hopefully what we'll have now is a competition where the group stage finishes and people go, right, when the quarters? They go, oh cool, the quarters are next week, are they? Sweet. Let's buy some tickets because we've been watching this team. You um you watch a team through the quarters and finals day sells itself. It always does. It was sold out in November, I think, for this coming year.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
not so much. Yes, every team gets a few hundred tickets each, and hopefully, because you've got this better structure in place, there's more of a flow to it, and you want to buy. So yes, there's not. This is the negative, and this is actually where last year it worked for the quarters having this big split. I think last year we had like three of the biggest ever Blast knockout stage attendances in those quarterfinals because there were these 6, 7 week periods between the group and the quarters. Counties went big on, and correctly, obviously, went big on selling their quarterfinals. The Oval certainly did. I think that was the record. I think that was the record crowd for quarterfinal. Um, Warwickshire certainly did. And where was the other one? Hove, maybe?
I think so. Yeah, I
Hove was a
think so.
sellout v Lancashire, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Montedrow would have been a sellout because it was Northampton's first time there for a while. It was a big home game, and they, were trying to, cheer the team on. Now, yeah, you lose a bit of that with playing the group stage into the quarters, but you can't have everything. This is where this has been such an awkward topic for years. Something's got to give, and you can't, you know, people say, we like it like this now because we sold out the quarters. Sure, but the competition is better for doing it this way. The integrity of it, the structure of it, the lead into the 100 is better as well. I think you know, hopefully doing it this way, you get proper wildcard system where if where there's a proper sort of flow into it. Guys who get those wildcards will deserve those wildcards for what they've done in the blast. That's sure, it's a moot point, a tiny tiny part of this, but I think also you just play you. It just makes more sense, right? Like to play a competition through to its conclusion rather than to play a competition and then if you think about it, have the entirety of the 100 played through before you play your quarters, and then have the entirety of the One Day Cup played, sorry, through to its final before you play your quarterfinals.
Hmm.
That doesn't make, that is common sense to me.
All right. Just to end up, I'm going to just chuck one at you, devil's advocate. Given that a future looks like July for the Vitality Blast, August for the 100,
Mm.
is there an argument of running the championship, the county championship, uninterrupted through the entirety of the English summer?
I mean, it will always be interrupted. You can't run through the English summit uninterrupted, I suppose, because you've got the other formats. So you'll always have, you can't play 14 Champion games without a blast game somewhere in there and without the 100 and whatever. So, um, what do you mean? Do you mean just
In terms of the players, the Venn diagram of players that play red ball against those that like to go off and play white ball, is there an argument that you could play championship cricket through August, for example?
I mean, look, with all these things, you can argue all these things, but you need to get 12 counties on board with it, and you're not going to get that. I can understand why counties don't want to play the championship in August. Um, as we've seen with the One Day Cup, some counties are just affected more than others, and I think it retains more if it's your blue ribbon competition, which it still is, and will continue to be. Then I don't think you should siphon away integrity where you don't have to. And I think if you were Surrey are the obvious example because they are the most impacted team by the hundred. Um, I can understand why Surrey would laugh at you if you said, "Do you want to let's play 2 rounds of Championship cricket in August?" Because Surrey are missing 15 first team players, and look, some of those are Jason Roy and Reece Topley and um, and Laurie Evans, but some of them um, are Jordan Clark and Dan Worrell, and very very good all format cricketers. Um, and I can understand why they'd laugh in your face and say, "No, no, we've won this thing 4 years in a row, 3 years in a row, maybe 4 years in a row. Um, we we get 6,000 through the gates on most days. The championship works for Surrey as it currently is. The debate around that schedule is still up in the air, but Surrey want to keep it as it is. They actually want to turn Division One into an 8-team competition because they want more integrity. They want teams playing everyone playing each other home and away. I completely get that. It works for them because they make it work and they've got the resources that it works both from a commercial perspective with the crowds they get in and also from a squad perspective, and they're not burning guys, breaking people and running them to the ground. So I would be. I also think if we get to a position where, and it still might happen, I don't think it will, but if we were to end up with a reduction of championship games to 12, which I think is less and less likely because of consensus, basically, you've got 18 teams who recognise the existing status quo is not great, and you've got 19 solutions. So you're never going to. That's a Rob Andrew quote actually from the start of the season when he was asked about how this would play out. Rob Andrews now at the ECB, he was at Sussex. He was very, very clear that this would be a county-led decision because it has to be
Yeah,
in line with
yeah,
the constitution. So, but I do think that if they were to get to 12 games, I think I would feel uncomfortable then about saying let's you can't then if you're going to have 12 games, you can't dilute the standard of two of them.
yeah, yeah,
And I also think if you're going to have 14 games, I don't. This is the thing. Like this is the trouble with all this stuff. It's all chicken and egg, and look, the hundred plays a big part, huge part in it. But um, if you have 14 games and you play it uninterrupted, and you have 2 games in that 2 games in August, the same people who complain now about not having games in August will complain about having diluted games in August. You can't win. Something's got to give somewhere, and what is given is that the hundred sell-off is giving the counties an awful lot of money, an awful lot of money, and money that a a revamped Blast, despite what some people say, could never have achieved. Like with the actual sums of money that have been brought in by the hundred sell-off. Sure, there are cons and there are risks, there are things to be worried by, whatever. But like you can't, we can't have everything with the schedule. Like we and that is not a new statement. That goes back to the 80s. I remember Ollie Dolby, the PCA chair, saying to me, in his first chat as chair, he said, look, the minutes of a PCA meeting are the same now as they were in 1967 when they had their first meeting. The money's rubbish, the umpires are rubbish, we want more money. Sorry, I'm sorry, and the schedule's rubbish. That is nothing is, like tongue in cheek, obviously, but that's the gist of it. The schedule has always been an issue. This has not been brought on by the hundred. It's been changed by the hundred, sure, but the schedule has always been a problem. Adam Fordham, who puts the schedule together, I interviewed him last November, and he said to me, I said, like, do you sympathise with the players on this? And the player argument that they'd rather not be driving on motorways at 3 a.m. to get to a game that starts 10 hours time. He said, look, I completely sympathise because he played for 10 years for Northants when the schedule was also ludicrous. You remember examples of going from Eastbourne to, is it St Anne's, Lyme St Anne's? Is that a
yeah.
place?
Lancashire, yeah,
Yeah, going from the end of a 3-day game to the start of a Sunday league game or something like that, with literally 15 hours between them, but also 300 miles between them. So this is not a new issue. Um, I suppose the new bit is that the players are being heard on this issue. Um, but I wouldn't play the championship in August
okay,
because I think it's I think the championship is a brilliant competition, and I think it would be a less brilliant competition if you were. Uh, I also do wonder as well if it was then played in August. I wonder I wonder what impact that would have on some of the smaller counties because Surrey are not going to stop treating the championship as their bread and butter. It's the one they want to win. So as soon as Surrey need 15 new players, you don't. that there is a knock-on effect, right, in terms of um, signings and play. Suddenly being a bit part player at a big county becomes even more attractive because you become a key player in that month. Things like that, things that people won't necessarily have factored into the equation. I've heard things like, could there be a quota on the number of players from each county that are taken by 100 team? No,
You wouldn't get
like
that through.
no,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have got that through now, let alone when external investors come in. The 100 is going to be the best competition that these investors can make it, and so those things like that are not going to pass. And likewise, you would only dumb down the championship, I think, by playing it alongside the 100. I think people accept the One Day Cup for what it is. But it's no one ever called the One Day Cup explicitly a development competition. It's become that because of what it is.
Hmm.
So you don't want to give the championship the opportunity to become that as well, if that makes sense. I've heard some players say, I've had conversation with some players who completely disagree with me on this and say, actually, if you look at the broad average, you could play the championship. If you think about it, there are 100 what is it, 106 or so England qualified players, non-overseas players essentially, get 100 gigs every year. Of those, 16 essentially contracted, or roughly 16, 20-ish essentially contracted. How many of that 20 are regularly playing the championship? Two or three, maybe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then more and more in certain weeks. But we'd say two or three, four or five regularly of that 20. Now of the next 30, sorry, not of the next 30, of the remaining 90, 30 play for two counties this year. Surrey and Lancashire are missing 28 between them to the 100. So those two are enormously affected. They're also probably the two counties who've got the most white ball only players within that. Um, but even so, those two are enormously affected. But the argument then is actually the average across the remaining 60 players, he's got 16 counties and 60 players. So on average, counties are missing about four players each, four or five players each, which in a normal round of Champo games is probably kind of what people are missing to injury anyway. So that's very selective analysis, and I don't subscribe to that necessarily. But that is the counterpoint, which that actually, if you put it in those terms, a lot of counties are, well, Worcestershire are only missing Adam Hose, for example, to the 100. They are basically at full strength if they want to be.
Hmm.
And other counties who've not been successful in white ball cricket in the last few years are the same. Gloucestershire are missing three, I think it is, despite four, I think, despite winning last year's Blast. They're only missing Delanger, who's now injured anyway. Actually, Singdale, David Payne, and Miles Hammond. They're the only four players away. Essex are missing. The Essex are a great example of where this is for me too problematic. Essex are only missing four players, but they are their best four players.
Yeah. That's
Walter,
right.
Walter Cox. You have to help me
Cook.
here. Cook and who's the other one? Who's the other one? I'm
Walter
sure it's
Cox.
Cook and is there another one? Maybe I've anyway.
I
Point
get
is,
your point. Yeah.
Essex would not particularly, and actually, as Essex have seen this season, they don't want to play the championship games without Cook and Cox, which they did do through injury in England earlier this year. Simon Harmer's been on paternity leave. Dean Elgar's not playing the One Day Cup. Obviously, he would play if the championship was going on, etc. But um, point being, some counties could do it and be broadly fine, but the product would be weakened and the top end would be weakened. And the best thing about the championship, I think, is that the top end is really strong and the top of Division One is really strong.
Well, there's lots to think about, and it's not clearly not as easy or straightforward as some people might suggest. Nick, brilliant conversation, and many, many thanks for your thoughts.
No
We'll
worries.
have to get you back again for some more conversation at a later date. But I guess in summary, a bit like QPR at the weekend, you just cannot win.
Nah, that was unfortunate. I walked off. I was playing actually, and I walked off the field. I turned my phone on to nine goal notifications. And oh no, I was fairly sure we went on the right end of it. I hoped we might have got more than one of them.
Well, they got a goal back.
We
If
did, we did. Well,
listeners didn't know, QPR lost 7-1 at Coventry on Saturday, which was
to clarify, that last notification was full time. It was eight goal notifications and a mercy killing. It's over. It's over, guys. We won stoppage time. There you go.
All right, Nick, great to talk, and we'll catch up soon.
Cheers, Aaron.